What's up guys, it's Ian here, back today with another video. I know it's been a few weeks since I've uploaded. I just didn't get any video requests and didn't have too many topics to make videos about, but yeah, I've still been collecting topics and writing down topics. Here on my iPad I've got just a list of different ideas that I intended to make videos about at some point. So yeah, I figured it's a nice day. It's a nice sunny day here, and I should make these videos just to clear out my docket. And maybe if one of you guys watches this video and comments down below with a request for a future video topic, I'll make my next video much more quickly. All right, so let's get started. I think recently there's been a lot of potentially unjustified hate against boomers. Maybe some of it is justified, but I think most of it is not justified. I think honestly most of them are just normal people who made fairly logical decisions given the environment that they were raised in. So I don't think that they're inherently evil or harmful, or that their intent was harmful, that they intended to destroy the world or make home prices unrealistic. I think actually the reason why most of home prices are unrealistic for young people is it's actually because of speculation on single family homes by large investment companies and real estate companies, not necessarily being predated by individual owners, if that makes sense, right? I know back when the boomers were our age, in their 20s and 30s, it probably took just a couple years of income to put the down payment on a house or to afford a house. Now it takes maybe more like 8 to 10 years of income to save up enough for a house for an average person, maybe more. I know that the average home buyer age is 38 years old now, which it's pretty devastating if you think about it, because that means some people aren't buying homes till they're 45 or 55, and some people are in their 20s, they're lucky. Not necessarily lucky, maybe they were strategic and they made the right decisions in their lives and ended up in a better financial situation before, earlier in their life, right? But anyways, I kind of rambled on there a lot, but what I wanted to get at is that I think that in the boomer generation, these people moved away from their generational homes and they lost their communities. And that community and home, it's hard to place a value on that. My notes were incorrect there, but it's hard to place a value on that, right? You can't necessarily place a monetary value on stable community and, let's say, having enough land that you could have a multi-generational household and farm, right? Throughout most of history, if you became a landowner, if your family was fortunate enough to become a landowner, you would have kind of a multi-generational farm or community, and you'd know the other people in your semi-local community as well. And that was very valuable because you and your multi-generational family, you could take care of each other when you got sick, and if your family wasn't doing well, then maybe the other people in your local town or village, you'd all help each other, right? You'd pick up the slack with the understanding that if I fall onto hard times, these people will pick up the slack for me one day too, right? So that's the whole idea there. But I think in the boomer generation, it may have been a longer term globalist multi-generational playbook where they became, let's say, interested in drugs and rock and roll, and these things were popularized and normalized, which fractured communities. They moved away from multi-generational homes because in their generation, houses and property was fairly cheap. They could realistically move across the country, work for a few years, and buy themselves a house. And it wasn't necessarily enough land to be a multi-generational farm or household. Like, you couldn't have that many people living there. It was more of a single family home. So they moved away, maybe got into drugs and rock and roll, argued with their parents, Their parents got old and aged and died out by themselves, had to sell off the multi-generational plots of land. And then as a result, now you have all these boomers who are in single family homes, fractured all across the country, and they got kind of baited into it with the lifestyle, the youthful lifestyle of being in your 20s, drugs and rock and roll. Maybe now we listen to EDM and rap music or whatever you listen to. Maybe it's still rock and roll as an overarching genre, but that's not the point. The whole idea of moving away from a multi-generational home for music and lifestyle and drug abuse, that's kind of ridiculous if you write it out as a life plan and you're like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do. It's like, no, that's a terrible idea. And like, then you're leaving your parents to get old, and then they have to sell off the property, potentially for pennies on the dollar, a fraction of what it's worth. The money gets divided amongst all the siblings, and then you lost your multi-generational land. You lost your land, which you may never get back. And now fast forward at this point in history, it's so hard to get that back. And more than even just the money, maybe you could get it back financially, but the real kicker is that once your kids move to the city and they lose the knowledge of how to tend to that land, it's one of those things that you can't really place a monetary value on. How to keep a farm alive, how to balance your time between the actual gardening aspect of it, the tending to the animals aspect of it, the fending off predatory animals aspect of it, interacting with your community, all of these things. These are actual skills. These are perishable skills. And if your kids grew up in a city, or if you grew up in a city, I'm assuming a lot of you watching this video grew up in a city, you probably wouldn't know how to tend to a farm even if you inherited it. Maybe you could learn how to do it on YouTube, and maybe there is still hope, but yeah, it's one of those things like community where you can't really place a monetary value on it. The knowledge, it's broken the chain of intergenerational knowledge transfer. So yeah, our grandparents or great-grandparents, a lot of them had that multi-generational land, and they were passing it down generation after generation. And then the boomers got kind of baited into leaving the land and abandoning their parents and then moving far away, and drugs and alcohol and rock and roll and lifestyle, and probably turned out to be a huge mistake, but the bait was enticing. And I think they were one of the first generations who was baited in such a manner. And this is a multi-generational playbook, because now their parents had to sell off the land. That land gets snatched up by real estate developers, pennies on the dollar. They can build high-rise buildings or whatever they want to put there. And it is this really like 50-year, 100-year, multi-generational plan. And I don't think it's the boomers' fault, because there was not really a good example before their generation for them to see like, this is a terrible mistake, this is clearly a bad idea, but there wasn't an example to have shown them that it was a bad idea. So yeah, that's where I think maybe it's not their fault. Yeah, this is probably the first generation where drugs and alcohol became fully normalized and socially acceptable. I don't think that these things were ever looked upon favorably before then. Generally, your town drunk, it's like, oh, that's the town drunk. Like, let's give him a few dollars so he doesn't die, but I don't want my daughter dating the town drunk, right? It's like, that's a very unfavorable position to be in. Nobody wants to be in that position. It was looked upon very negatively. Sometimes it would create philosophical geniuses. Sometimes it would create authors and scholars and people who create great literary works of art. But what's to say that those individuals wouldn't have become, let's say, noteworthy composers or scholars or authors without drugs and alcohol? Maybe they didn't need those things, right? Some percentage of them, maybe they did need it. It was the spark that they otherwise wouldn't have had. But anyways, yeah, I don't think it's all the boomers' fault. I think much of it was an elaborate trap. And it's up to us to recognize this as a trap and not just be super ageist against them and be like, oh, pitchforks, it's all their fault. Like, we need a revolution, because like ultimately most of them are just old people, and a lot of them are our parents. And I don't think that they were doing those things out of malice. Maybe they had some arguments with their parents and they left, but millennials do that too. Millennials get in arguments with their parents over drugs and alcohol, and they're like, oh, you don't understand me, I'm leaving. It's like, yeah, that's basically what the boomers did, except they also had the additional bait of like, houses are cheap, go across the country, you can do drugs and alcohol and work part-time and buy a house. And it's like, well, shit, that sounds like a pretty good deal, right? And yeah, I guess right now millennials and Zoomers, we don't really have that deal. That's not even a deal that's on the table for us. It's a lot worse. It's kind of like, if your parents have a house, you have to kind of live there and try not to pay rent, save up enough money to one day buy a house. Or if your parents are renting, maybe just help them with the rent, you know, do what you can. But yeah, now I think the real estate developers, they have all the power, they have all the property. So if you split from your family and you're all paying rent, it's like now your genetic lineage is really never going to buy property, because you're just renting for all of eternity. And if your parents are renting and you're renting, it's like, well, you could have pulled together that money to do something else, right? And maybe this video is food for thought. I've been rambling a bit here. Comment down below. Let me know, what do you think? Do you agree with me? Is it really just the boomers' fault? I think it's kind of the corporations and the large real estate companies' predation of the market and cornering of the market, and the systems of government that allowed them to get this level of, I guess, control and ownership in the first place. Maybe we do need some restrictions on ownership. Maybe a pure free market will ultimately always spiral into a few companies having more ownership, because they can take a loss, they can outbid you on the home, and then they can set the rental prices, and then they can set the resale prices at whatever they want. And hey, they're not letting go any inventory below this set point because they have all the inventory, right? So maybe we need a different system of government. Maybe we need a third party. I know that in 2028, there might be a third party. So let's keep an eye out for that. Let's see what happens. And as always, thank you for watching this video. I guess it's been long enough. Please drop a comment down below, so that way I'll know what to make a video about next time. And if I do get a comment, and if I do get requests for video ideas, you can expect my next video to come out a lot sooner than this one. Thank you again, and have a good day.